Ooh, I scratched that up. I should not put this box on there. That's a bad idea. Today I'm here with this Novitech spoiler for the roof of my SF90. Let me zoom in here. You may notice that this spoiler has a crack here along the edge. Now Novitech has insisted that I dropped something on my spoiler. The car is always parked inside. Obviously, I haven't dropped anything on the top of the spoiler. The spoiler has simply split at a seam. Novitech insists that their carbon fiber does not fail. One of the guys even compared himself to Jesus, but I guess that's beside the point. I'm not sure if it shows up in the camera, but you can see over here where the two pieces have not separated, that they are in fact two pieces that have been bonded together. So their seam has failed. It has been almost a year that they've been yanking me around, promising that they would replace this spoiler, and they have not. So I am going to fix this spoiler myself. I've got some epoxy here. I think it should be fairly easy to epoxy this seam back together. The way I intend to proceed is fairly straightforward. I'm going to use this cardboard here. I'm going to cut out some little wedges. I'm going to stick them on the sides. I don't think I can get the epoxy all the way to the edges, but I can seal up the center enough that there shouldn't be any visible gaps. Even after I do that, I'll probably still run like a vinyl strip along here to sort of hide that defect. I'm going to cover the area outside the seam with this painter's tape so the epoxy doesn't get on the actual piece. The masking tape has been put on there. So I put this on as close as I could with the expectation that when I put the epoxy on and clamp it, this gap will seal up. I think it does. So now I'm going to put tiny wedges onto the sides, and I will mix the adhesive and apply it. Okay, this gap should be sufficient for me to put in the epoxy, so I'm going to mix that now. I'm going to use a piece of cardboard to apply that to the top and the bottom. I will then remove the wedges. I will press the piece together and hold it down with tape. In the past, I've gotten some flack for not really showing what I'm doing, which is a fair assessment because I'm not really good about showing the process sometimes. So I just wanted to take a second and very carefully explain everything. So this is the epoxy I'm using. When you get it, you break off the tip, not this tip. This tip is actually part of the handle up here. After you use your epoxy, you take this tip and you put it on so you can use your epoxy again later. This is another tip that goes on the end, and it's an applicator. If you want to put a lot of epoxy somewhere, I didn't need that. I used cardboard, which I'll demonstrate. When you push the epoxy out, you want to make sure you've got elements from both sides. This particular one seems to only want to push out a little bit from the left side. And once you're done, you put that black cap back on, just like that, and that preserves your epoxy for next time. I'm just using tiny strips of cardboard to mix the epoxy up. As far as applying it to the spoiler, I just covered the piece of cardboard with epoxy on both sides, and then I rubbed it into that gap, reapplicating a couple times to make sure that the entire thing was covered. And then I used tape to compress the spoiler, hold that together until it dried. Once the epoxy was semi-cure, so 5 to 10 minutes, I took most of the tape off. I used this rubbing alcohol to remove any of the epoxy that had kind of spilled over. And then I used 3 more pieces of this masking tape to put pressure on that seam. And I think it turned out pretty good. It's not perfect. Even if I didn't put any vinyl on there, I don't think it would be an issue. No one's going to see something like that, you know, from however many feet away. The biggest issue for me wasn't necessarily cosmetic. It was the fact that there was the split. And I wouldn't say it's a structural issue, but it's more than cosmetic. So my plan now is to let this sit probably overnight, and I'll reinstall it tomorrow and we'll be good to go. It is now the next day, and so we can pull the tape off because the epoxy should be all set. I'm going to remove all this tape. We will polish up the spoiler a bit and have a look. Okay, the tape's removed. Use my trusty Windex here. Get this all polished up. And now when we look at the seam, the two pieces are bonded back together. See, it's not perfect by looking at the light, but again, nobody's going to see that. So this piece is the effectively repaired. I'm going to put it back on the car. I have one potential concern. I'm wondering if what originally caused this defect to manifest is some kind of twisting on the chassis. The piece is up on top of the roof, and maybe the chassis twisted a little bit, and that's what caused the crack. There's some kind of force being placed on this piece. So I suppose time will tell. We'll find out if it cracks again. At which point I think that I would go after Novitech yet again. But in the meantime, I consider this situation resolved. And I fixed it, which makes sense because I'm the one who broke this. Here's a quick little outro. You can see that the spoiler is fixed. It no longer pops open when pressure is applied at the top. We're good to go. Just checking in. It's been a few weeks since I did the repair on this carbon fiber spoiler. I've had this car out a couple times, been on a few drives, and looks like the repair is working. In the interest of being completely fair to Novitech, it is possible somebody broke this. Maybe they came in here and they hit it, or they stepped on it, I don't know. It didn't happen while I was here. I know I didn't do it. I know it didn't come like that. So, but again, it is possible that it cracked and it is not any fault of Novitech's. Maybe it's not an adhesive issue from their factory. I don't know. But what I do know is that if you have a problem, it is your problem. I've got something fun here I'm gonna try. I noticed there weren't a lot of installation videos for valve controllers like this. I don't know if I'll make one either, but if anybody wants to see that though, let me know. I might make one. I'm hoping we can access the exhaust valves through here. That would be really simple. We can get this thing installed pretty quickly, but we shall see.